So we just want to do a quick video on how to repair any chips or scratches in your carbon fiber plate. Uh, One of the first things we're going to do is clean it with alcohol, and then I'll go over the tools we're going to need. But I want the alcohol to dry, so I have a bottle of IPA, fresh paper towel, no shop rags or sponges or anything else that could put the dirt back in there. I just want to make sure that's super clean, so our patch job mends with it completely. Now what you have to understand is our carbon fiber is made of a twill weave of carbon fiber fabric that's been impregnated with epoxy. So the ideal patch is with epoxy. In this case we're using a Gorilla 5-minute epoxy. It's a 2-part epoxy that catalyzes. I'll show you how to mix it and how to apply it. It sets in 5 minutes, but it doesn't get hard for about 24 hours. So you definitely want to leave it overnight when we're done. Okay. I also would recommend that you have some gloves on hand, some masking tape so we could tape off some areas to not get dirty, some kind of a board to mix the epoxy on, and I like something nice and shiny, so I use old magazine backs, some kind of a scraper or a spatula. I use a lot of these free credit cards and hotel keys, and then a toothpick or a piece of wooden stick to help to apply it. The applicator mixer that comes with your epoxies, just throw them away. They're crap. You don't want to ever mix by swirling epoxy around. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mask off the area around where we're working so that I don't get any accidental spills of epoxy on it. And it'll also help when it comes time for filing. And I'll show you that when that time comes. I'm giving myself a little bit of excess area so I could blend out the epoxy. There we go. And I'm going to push it down right around that area. I don't need to push down the others. So, next step is to mix the epoxy. Now, do not swirl epoxy around with a little stick, but try to follow these directions unless you have one of these epoxy mixing applicator nozzles, but then again, you would be very professional if you had one of those and know already how to use it. Otherwise, what we do is we open it up, and it's a 2-part component. So we want to try to output equal portions of both sides. I just don't need very much, but I want to make sure both sides are coming out equally. When they start touching, it starts to activate. I look at it, it looks like there's a little less of the right side, the far away side. So I'm going to apply that. That looks good to me. I pull back the plunger a little bit so I can get the tip back in. Okay, now that we have the epoxy, I'm going to go and spread it out horizontally. Then I'm going to collect it vertically, or vertical and horizontal. I'm just going to collect in the opposite direction. Spread it out. And then you want to wipe the bottom of the card very well so we don't have any unmixed resin there. And then I'm going to collect it again with the opposing motion. Do this about 3 or 4 times and it's going to be completely amalgamated. You also want to make sure that you're getting the outlying areas so we don't have any unmixed resin in there. So I spread it out one last time. And now I'm going to collect it, and it makes a horrible stink. And there it is. We don't need very much for that little dot. We actually don't want to use too much or you're going to be filing forever. Now I'm just going to try to get enough to fill that hole. I'm going to try to push it in so we don't have air bubbles. And I'm probably going to try to remove a little bit of excess material so it's not too much filing later. Let me see, maybe with 2 toothpicks. That's pretty good. That's just a very little amount. I want to make sure that it's making a very flat surface over the affected area. There we go. So we're going to let that set for 24 hours and then we'll come back and we will file it. By the way, now's a good time to clean your tools so that hopefully you can reuse them. I usually just pull all the epoxy down to the side. If I had something that was waiting to be glued, I use any excess. And then I wipe off my card. And hopefully you could use it more than once that way. Otherwise, throw the whole thing out and use some more hotel room keys in the future. Okay, the epoxy has cured over 48 hours. I don't know if you can see that up close, but there it is. And I'll show you the tools we'll need and some of the things we'll be doing. So we're going to need some flat files without handles. I like the ones with the cross grooves, not the cross, but just diagonal grooves. I have one that's a little more aggressive than the other. Then we're going to need some sandpaper, 400 grit, 600 grit. These are all wet dry, and if you want to, you can even go to 1,000 grit for the last stage. I mounted my most rough, the 400, on a block by spray mounting the back and spray mounting the wood, waiting until they were dry to a touch. They should feel like tape, just a little tacky, but nothing comes off in your hands. Put them together and you have a permanent block. We're going to need some water for the wet sanding, some paper towel, and that's it. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to leave the tape on for the first phase, where I'm just going to rough take down the peak of the epoxy, and I'm probably going to have to pull the tape off pretty quickly. So let me go ahead and just lay it flat and use pressure in the center. Oh, by the way, let's back up for a second. I forgot to say, we are working on a very flat surface. My workbench is years and years of being beaten up in paint and globs. We want this to be a flat surface, so I just took a piece of laminated wood. So let me go on. I'm just trying to get the peaks of the epoxy off. I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape now, because I'm not sure that we're getting down below the tape. You can see the epoxy seems to have spread a bit. No, not really. It's still there. So this was the affected area that we scratched up. I'm just going to concentrate my strength there. Not too much. I want the file to do the cutting. I don't want to scratch the rest of the surface. You can see that it's getting to the point where we're seeing just the fill area. Have a little bit of excess that I want to get off. I'm going to move to the smoother file. We don't want to go down too far. We just want to get off the epoxy, and that stuff is tough. There we go. We're starting to get down below the epoxy that we put on there. We don't want to take off all of the epoxy from the carbon fiber sheet if we could help it, but regardless, if you go too low, you're not going to be able to cut into the carbon. You'll just expose the pattern a little bit more. So I've worked it pretty well. I'm going to go to my 400 grit, and same thing, I'm going to work the center. I might smooth it out to just make sure that anything I got with the file gets smooth. And it's pretty flat now. So now I'm going to start with my wet dry. So I'm going to take my 600 grit. I fold it into thirds to get a little bit more rigidity. I am going to put a little bit of water on the sandpaper or on the surface, whatever you prefer. We're going to work the central area, but then we're going to blend it outward so we don't have a different pattern on the rest of the plate. Doesn't take very much if you've done a good filing job. It's already pretty much disappeared. I'm going to move to the 1000 grit and just give it one final pass to smooth it all out. The water and the wet dry just helps to remove any of the shavings so that they're not re-scratching the surface. Okay, let's clean it up and have a look. All in all, it was a pretty fast process as long as you're not overly abundant with the epoxy that you put onto the plate. You could polish it even finer if you want to, but I would not use polishing compounds as they contain wax. That's the main vehicle behind keeping the polishing grits in the polishing compounds, and the wax would be a adhesion prohibitor. So if you get in close, you could see there is the patch, and there is no more divot. It's completely covered, and it seems very flat. If I wanted to, I could work further, but I think we have a beautiful surface and a beautiful finish there. It's just cleaning with alcohol. I'll start with the back, and then move to the front. Clean with fresh paper towel, no shop rags, no wipes, no sponges. We don't want any of the dirt repropagating onto it. I'm even going to be extra sure and go with one more fresh piece of paper towel. Paper towel is your friend when it comes to cleaning build surfaces. And there we go. It's impossible to see where we repaired. It's a beautiful job. Okay, so we have the repaired plate and a test print. I did it in PETG. It's already off. And you can see that you could barely see the repair. It's right there if you zoom in on it. It's just slightly discolored. One interesting thing is that by sanding the surface with the 1000 grit, you get a nice smooth surface, but you also see even more of the carbon fiber texture. So if that's desirable, that's also a nice added feature. Let's look at the repair again. It's right there. It's very hard to see. But if you do it right, you'll be able to repair any scratch or gouge that might happen.